Hi everyone, good day. I am Barry Ramesar to discuss the topic of fire prevention and code enforcement for the city of Jacksonville, Florida. I will share information with you today on how we can best achieve this effort. Let's start with a history lesson from almost 75 years ago, when a tragic fire in 1946 at the Winecoff Hotel killed 119 people. This tragedy prompted action from the president to institute further federal actions for fire prevention. His actions led to a fire concept which we call the three E's, starting with engineering, which focuses on building designs and codes and best material available. The second is enforcement, which is related to fire codes practices and standards. And the third and final E is education, which is to teach people about how to prevent fires and how to deal with it in an emergency situation. Let's speak about fire codes in Florida. In the state of Florida, fire safety regulations are based on the Florida Building Code, acronym FBC, and the Florida Fire Prevention Code, acronym FFPC. The FFPC incorporates the National Fire Protection Association standards, which we commonly know as the NFPA standards. We also include any Florida specific amendments. Let's talk about fire resistance, fire testing, fire ratings of building materials. Fire resistance test measures such as flame spread, heat release, and smoke production. And fire resistant ratings, called FRR, are defined as the time until failure in minutes or hours that a material can withstand a fire under specific conditions. These ratings are combined with stringent building codes to help reduce fires in buildings. There are standards such as the ASTM International Underwriters Laboratories or UL and the International Code Council or ICC, and they target categories of beams, columns, floors, ceilings, roofs, etc. when it comes to fire safety. Fire tests are conducted on materials, components, and systems, for example, walls, floors, doors, structural members, to determine the resistance to fires, and the results are used to assign fire ratings. There's three factors to note. One is the time to failure, the temperature required to cause the failure, and the strength of load capacity at certain temperatures. Three additional factors to consider are stability, which measures the ability to withstand applied loads, integrity, the ability to stay intact without cracks, and insulation, a measurement of the ability to slow transmission of heat from one end to another. Fire-related components must meet or exceed these fire resistance and other FBC standards. Our fire authorities enforce fire-related materials and systems in critical areas. And for example, fire-related walls and doors are mandated in multiple family residential units and apartments, high-rise structures, commercial facilities, etc. Unsafe structures are those that don't meet the requirements for safety, stability, and fire protection. An absence of fire-related materials can be a critical violation, especially in a high-occupancy building or areas of high traffic. Poor maintenance of fire systems, fire suppressions, fire sprinklers, alarms, or extinguishers, which are not tested regularly or maintained, are issues that can cause unsafe situations. Structural deterioration, for example, erosion of fire resistance barriers over time, or walls or floors that were once fire rating deteriorating due to environmental conditions, poor maintenance, just time lapse leading to deterioration, all compromise fire resistance. Examples of inadequate fire separation can be unsealed penetrations, particularly around pipes, ducts, outlets, and this allows fire to spread between compartments. Unsafe structures in Jacksonville can be identified during routine inspections, and our local fire marshals and inspectors are responsible for ensuring that buildings comply with fire codes. When they are not, we issue citations and fines and ensure remedial repairs take place. In Jacksonville, our biggest hazard is with wood construction, which is very common in the older residential areas around our downtown districts, and these are highly combustible. These buildings are very likely to allow fire spread through cavities, gaps, or improperly sealed penetrations. They can also collapse because as the wood burns away, it becomes weaker structurally. Mixed use buildings where we have residential and commercial are also a big hazard, and the mixing of these occupancies can create situations where fire containment measures may not be sufficient or efficient for all types of uses. Fires could spread quickly in residential areas, putting residents at great risk. Concrete and steel buildings are less prone to fires, but when these structures are exposed to high temperatures, if they are not adequately fireproof, they can collapse. Mixed use buildings, in particular, also present significant fire hazards, and they require strict fire prevention and safety standards to prevent fire and fire spread. In the past, many fires have occurred not because of deficiency in the fire codes, but because of a lax in our code enforcement. Now, during initial construction and commissioning, code inspections are usually very thorough, but as time passes by, especially if there's modifications and changes on these buildings, it can affect fire prevention. Also, poor housekeeping standards and removal of fire protection barriers can be a problem. Unsafe structures, sometimes due to poor maintenance, must be addressed to mitigate that risk. Our duty as local City Council members to promote public education and enforcement is imperative and should never be overlooked. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen of City Council.